Hello everybody, this is our new text, Song of the Dolphin Boy. And this is the cover, this is by Elizabeth Laird. Behind me, I've got the map of the village where all the characters live. As you can see. So you can see up there, you can see the lighthouse, and then you can see some of the family's homes. So that's the Lamb's house where the story starts. And then behind me you've got school. And then you've got the shops and the harbour here with the fishing boats. And then on this side you've got the lovely beach, little cove area here with beach. So what we're going to do is we're going to read to you the book. I'm going to start with chapter 1. And we're each going to read a little bit for you. So I hope you enjoy. So, chapter 1. It all began at Dougie Lamb's 8th birthday party. It wasn't a big party. In fact, there were only 4 other children at it, including Dougie's older sister, Kyla. Mrs. Lamb, Dougie's mum, had been so excited about organising her darling boy's birthday party that she'd have invited 150 children, if there'd been 150 children to invite. But Stronghead was a very small village in a far-off corner of Scotland, and there were only a few houses gathered around the harbour, along with a tiny school and a lighthouse up on the cliff top. And there weren't any other children from the village to ask, except for Finn. But nobody ever invited Finn to anything. Kyla and Mrs. Lamb were both small, with loads of
blonde hair, and they both liked everything to be pretty and perfect. Sweet was their favourite word, followed by cute. Kyla's dad called them my sugar plums. He worked on the oil rigs out at sea and was often away from home. Dougie missed him dreadfully. Mr. Lamb would have never given him a kitten jigsaw puzzle for his birthday like Kyla had, which was nearly as bad as the little Prince Charming outfit from his mum. No, Dougie's dad gave him useful, interesting things, like sets of spanners, and a chain with a padlock and key. Dougie had adored them as soon as he'd seen them. This was a grown-up present, something useful. He could stop things from opening and tie things down. It made him feel in control. In fact, the padlock and chain were Dougie's favourite possessions of all time. Kyla and Mrs. Lamb had been fussing round all morning getting ready for the party, and at last the little gold clock on the mantelpiece in the sitting room struck a tinkly 3 chimes. It was time for the other children to arrive. In fact, they were walking slowly up the road towards the Lamb's cottage, grumbling all the way. I never wanted to go to this stupid party anyway, Charlie groaned. He was short and stocky,
with a head as hard and round as a cannonball. Knowing Dougie's mum, it would be all soft and stupid and babyish. And, anyway, my dad was going to take me out fishing in my own wee boat this afternoon. Amir grunted in sympathy. And I just got to the next level in my game, he said with a sigh. Mum only lets me play on my computer on Saturday afternoons. I'll have to wait a whole week now. Amir shifted his glasses up his nose with one long slim finger. His forehead, under a heavy fringe of black hair, was creased in a frown. Jazz looked at him sympathetically. Amir's mum, Mrs. Farida, was their class teacher, and very strict. Well, she said, trying to be fair, at least there'll be a cake and everything. Anyway, Dougie can't help it that there aren't any other kids of his age around. Charlie scowled at her. Why do you have to be so stupid and nice all the time? She crossed her dark eyes, stuck her tongue out at him, pushed her thumbs up into her ears and waggled the rest of her hands. Her freckled face looked so funny, framed by bouncing brown hair, that Amir burst out laughing, and even Charlie had to grin.
front door and pressed the bell. Kyla rushed to open it before the chimes had even died away, and the three guests went reluctantly inside. There was a bit too much of everything in the Lamb's house. The cushions on the flowery sofa were too soft, the door chimes were too musical, the bow around the neck of Buttons, the kitten, was too baby blue, and there were too many frills on the curtains. Nobody realised that Finn, who had seen the three children on their way to the party, had eventually doubled back to see what was going on. He was standing outside in the garden, glaring into the living room and shredding Mrs. Lamb's prize roses one by one to leave a scattering of pink petals on the grass. "They never let me do anything," Finn muttered to himself. "They're all mean and horrible, and I wouldn't be friends with them even if they asked me." He knew, though, that the last bit wasn't true. Finn longed to have friends more than anything else in the world. He didn't particularly want to be a computer genius like Amir, work in a pet shop like Kyla, or be a footballer like Charlie. He didn't want to be a mechanic like Dougie, or even a prime minister like Jasmine. He only wanted to be a friend. Curiosity had brought him back to spy on the party, which Dougie had been going on about for weeks. Finn had known that it might feel like torture to look in from the outside, but he hadn't been able to resist. As he watched, though, a slow smile spread over his face. The party wasn't going very well at all. In fact, it was awful. Mrs. Lamb's idea of a children's party had got stuck.
Somewhere around the year when Dougie was 4, the children were being forced to endure Pass the Parcel, Simon Says, and The Farmers in His Den. Finn nearly laughed out loud at the sight of Charlie, whose temper was about to boil over anyway, and who hated being kept indoors, pretending to be the farmer's horse. He looked like a tiger about to spring. "He'll bite someone in a minute, with a bit of luck," Finn thought bitterly. "I really hope he does. I hope he freaks out and breaks something. I hope he smashes the place up." Amir, who was dying to get home to his computer game and had been chewing his lip with frustration, was now yawning till his jaw ached, while Jasmine kept looking at the cuckoo clock on the wall. She was obviously wondering why the hands were going round so slowly. Even Dougie, the birthday boy himself, was looking more and more anxious. Only Kyla seemed to be enjoying herself. She had given up joining in with the games and was playing with Buttons the cat. "Tea time!" sang out Dougie's mum, whisking away the cloth that had been hiding everything laid out on the table.
He saw Jass's face. She was frowning at Dougie as if she thought he'd been mean. "She's the only one who's worth anything," Finn told himself grudgingly. Dougie, realising that his party was going wrong, was desperately counting on the big moment that would put everything right. "Wait till you see my cake," he babbled. "Mum made it herself. It's a special shape. It's going to be a surprise. I think it's going to be a dinosaur." "Yeah, a pretty little dino baby with a bow round its neck," sneered Charlie. "I bet it'll be lovely, Dougie," Jazz said kindly. "I don't care what it looks like, as long as it's chocolate," said Amir. Jazz turned to say something to him, and was suddenly facing the window. Finn ducked down quickly behind the rose bush, out of sight. When at last Mrs. Lamb brought the cake out of the kitchen and placed it carefully down in the middle of the table, Finn nearly laughed out loud. It wasn't a dinosaur, and it wasn't even chocolate. It was in the shape of a cat, with the eyes made of sparkly silver balls and a blue bow tied around its neck. Dougie's face went red. "Mum," he wailed, "it's pink." Charlie snorted. Amir sniggered. Jasmine bit her lip, feeling sorry for Dougie. Kyla clapped her hands. "It's lovely, Mum," she said. "Can I have the tail?" Finn couldn't remember the last time he'd had a piece of cake. He wanted to burst in through the window, grab the whole thing, and run off with it. Instead, he watched as the candles were lit and Dougie blew them out. His mouth watered all over again as Mrs. Lamb cut the cake and handed out the pieces. He knew he ought to go before he started to feel too lonely, but he couldn't tear himself away. When the cake was half demolished and everyone's mouth was sticky with pink icing, Charlie said loudly, "Can we go now? My dad'll have brought the boat in. He needs me to help unload the lobster pot." "Not yet, dear," cooed Dougie's mum. "I've had a sweet idea. Now here's a piece of coloured paper and a felt tip each. I want every one of you to write some birthday wishes to Dougie. Then we'll tie them to the balloons and let them go up into the sky where the birds can read them and send Dougie birthday messages too." "Mum, no! Mum!" wailed Dougie.
"I wouldn't want a bird's message landing on my head. Birthday message or no birthday message," said Charlie. The others burst out laughing. "Especially not a great big seagull," said Amir. "No need to be crude, boys. I'm sure you can think of something lovely to write," said Mrs. Lamb, frowning. "What you mean, like, Dougie, you are a sweet, cute, ducky wee bar lamb, coochie coo?" Charlie whispered to Jasmine. She dug him in the ribs, trying not to laugh. "How do you spell gorgeous?" said Amir, winking at Jazz. Dougie looked as if he was going to be sick. A few minutes later, Finn had to dash out quickly through the garden gate as the children burst out of the house like champagne fizzing out of a bottle. He scrambled up the hill above the village, ignoring the gorse that scratched his legs, and watched as a clutch of brightly coloured balloons were lifted by the breeze out of the hands of the children. With their strings trailing behind them, they floated up and away, skimming the chimneys off the
old fishermen's cottages, sailing over the roof of the school, where Mrs. Farrader, Amir's mother, was writing reports above the village shop where Mrs. Lamb worked during the week. They glided past the tall white tower of the lighthouse, where Professor Jameson, Jasmine's father, was writing busily at his desk, and across the harbour, where Charlie's dad was unloading his lobster pots. Then they drifted out to sea, sinking lower as the air hissed out of them, until they landed on the choppy water and bobbed up and down like brightly coloured flowers. For some reason, the sight of them made Finn shudder. Reluctantly, he made his way home to the tumble-down cottage along the cliff top where he lived with his dad. He didn't look back as he walked up the hill, but if he had, he'd have seen Mrs. Lamb standing in her garden, looking down in puzzlement at the mass of torn rose petals all over her neatly mown lawn.